Hello, hello, Obi. My name is Daniella, and this is Alternative Society Podcast. Our podcast is, we're talking about two different people who are following the unconventional career path in life, which is anything within the arts or certain parts of tech that wasn't usually recognized. And this is Obi. He is a designer. He likes to put everything in designer because he's a fashion designer. He's also a UX designer. We're going to talk to him as well, how he blended both of those things just to form his own brand as well. Hi, Obi. How you doing?
Going on, I'm doing well. And I feel like the all-encompassing term is multidisciplinary designer.
I used to use that term too before, but you're probably
it's a mouthful, but it's a mouthful. But I mean, if we're gonna be technical, that is the term I would use, or I've used it in the past to great success. So,
so you live in New York right now?
Yes, I do. In Brooklyn.
Brooklyn, New York. Did you always live in New York, or did you live somewhere else before you moved to New York?
No, so I'm from Jersey. It's a whole long story. So I actually grew up in Canada, so I'm Canadian.
Okay.
So I spent the first 10 years of my life growing up in Canada, and then moved to Jersey when I was 10 years old, and I've been in Jersey, and then now I live in Brooklyn.
Okay, amazing. So could you tell us about how you got into, you could even start from your childhood. We'll start from fashion. How did you get into fashion? Because I could already tell that you're an artist, a creative mind by a lot. We've talked about it a lot for a lot of reasons. But how did you discover that fashion was something that you wanted to get into?
Do you want the do you want like the like elevator pitch story, or do you want like the true honest story? All right, because there's like the cleaned up version, and then there's the long version. But
we want the long.
The long of it is, I just remember way back in middle school. I'll say the relevance of my mentioning that I grew up in Canada comes into play because when I was growing up, there was not a lot of emphasis on clothing or style or fashion. People just wore clothes. Like, I don't ever remember growing up in Canada and thinking about my fit or which sneakers to have. I didn't even know what brands were. Like, we just wore clothes, and because we had to legally, like we were legally obligated to wear clothing. So we did it. And then when I moved to America, I remember I was in fifth grade, and one of the first experiences I had that I can remember is getting clowned for my fit. Those kids were ruthless. They clowned my fit. I remember, for those who remember, I went to Walmart with my mom, first day of school, shopping, and we got to the sneaker section, and I'm just looking for stuff that I like. And for those who remember, I picked up a pair of Shaq sneakers. Shaquille O'Neal used to have a sneaker brand, a sneaker line that he was putting in Walmart. And if I'm not mistaken, he wanted to use his likeness as a top tier NBA player to provide footwear that was affordable for kids who couldn't buy Jordans. They could still have a sneaker by a cool NBA player. Now, based on my experience in elementary school, I would say that didn't work because nobody cared like that it was Shaq or whatever. I thought they were cool, but I got clowned. It was bad. And I remember getting back from school the next day and putting them shoes away and just telling my mom, like, I can't wear these shoes anymore. I need better clothes. And it dawned on me that, style is actually important. So fast forward a couple years into middle school now. So going from the fifth grade to, I would say, about the eighth grade, I was a big fan of G-Unit. Still am, although they don't really make music together anymore. But big fan of G-Unit, big fan of 50. Funny story with that, my dad actually bought me a copy of Get Rich or Die Trying when it came out. And that was the first body of music, and that probably sounds crazy because I was a kid, but that was the first body of music that I consciously consumed. And I remember at first not liking it, and then, when you're young and all of your peers like something, you're going to listen to it more, you're going to be influenced, you're going to get into it. I say all that to say, I remember just wanting to be just like these guys, watching the music videos, seeing them in magazines and seeing the clothes they were wearing, and just being like, man, I gotta get on that. I gotta start doing that as an impressionable young kid. And I remember, I'm paraphrasing my mom here, she would tell this story about how I would pretend and play make-believe that I was wearing the clothes from the videos, and she was taking notes as mothers do. And that year for Christmas, she bought me a G-Unit hoodie. And I still remember the hoodie, like it was heather gray, had camo lining in the hood, had Gorilla Unit written on the front, and the charcoal and orange felt. I can describe the hoodie in great detail to this day. And that hoodie inspired me to then take the money I received for Christmas, and instead of using it to buy video games, because I was a big gamer, I used it to buy clothes. I went to this store called Foreman Mills, which is like, back then it was like Marshall's for that young black hip hop culture. They had Sean John, South Pole, Echo, and they had G-Unit. Went there, took my Christmas money and bought a few fits. And for some reason, not to pat myself on the back, those fits were hard because I wore them to school that following week, and it's like my life changed. It was like I was a different person. People treated me a lot differently. I didn't get clowned anymore for the way I dressed, and I started to get a lot more attention from the ladies. And honestly, that's really where my interest in fashion came from. It wasn't like some deep, I'm inspired by the greats and all that. Nah, I didn't have any idea of the Yves Saint Laurents, the Givenchy's, all of those with, names that I probably pronounced poorly. I didn't have an idea of those designers. It was much more personal, I guess, the way I got into it.
Do you think they were clowning you because they didn't understand how you put fits together, or they were clowning you because the style was bad?
Both. It wasn't, and it's interesting. No one's ever asked me that. It wasn't. I don't know if I could say the style was bad because I wasn't intentionally putting things together. Like, it's not like I just wore things that I liked. And at the time, let me just make sure I mute my devices. At the time, I put on what I liked, but I guess I didn't, my taste wasn't developed as it pertains to the zeitgeist or anything like that. So yeah, then, coming from a foreign land to them, I just didn't have the sensibilities and nuances of what kids in that era thought was fly. So,
because the reason I asked that question is people that think like us, we have a very different way of doing a lot of things that people do not understand. So the first reaction would be a pushback, or they would laugh at what you wear until it becomes to be a trend. That's why I asked you, did you think they were laughing because they didn't understand? Like, even then, unconsciously, you didn't think you were just wearing what you liked. But just by stance of the kind of person that you are, based on what we've talked, you might have put something together that I probably would have seen and liked, or somebody else who was probably creative would have seen and liked, but they didn't understand that. Because I had seen something on Instagram story the other day where we were talking about the bouncer was telling you that what you were was weird. Remember?
Yeah. It's a funny story. I was out with the guys, and it was New York, summer, weekend, whatever, going to a bunch of different spots. And this one bouncer, we walked up to this one spot, and I should have known because the two dudes, I saw two guys get in before we got there, and they had like suits on and stuff like that, blazers. They was kind of doing a lot. So I should have known. I should have got the hint. We get to the door, and the bouncer's just like, yeah, nah, he's not getting in. I don't know what he's wearing, but that's not normal. And we were like, what's normal? And he said, not that. We all had a really good laugh about that. To this day, we still bring it up and it's funny. But yeah, I guess that was a full circle moment. That was like the adult version of what I was going through as a kid, before I was able to, I guess, go back to, because what a lot of people will say is, as children, our preferences, our personalities, our likeness, I imagine, is fully developed, right? Kids, even children, before they succumb to societal pressures and images, propaganda and things, have preferences that they can't necessarily describe as kids, but they just know. And I guess when you put it that way, those same preferences that educated my choices before, I guess, that was snuffed out of me just by the children at the time. Now that I'm older, matured, and have developed my self-awareness, you could say I've gone back to that, but it's just a more educated and it's a more refined version of the style I had back then. Yeah.
So you talked about your parents a lot. Your parents are Nigerian. What did they say about some of the fits that, especially when you started getting, because now I feel like you're more open about how you dress, and it doesn't matter what somebody else says about what you wear, as long as you feel comfortable, you just wear it. How do your parents react to like things that you wear
today?
Would start from in the past and then today.
Excuse me. In the past, when I started being influenced by hip hop culture, rap music, 50 Cent, G Unit, it was a battle between myself and my parents, because my parents, I went from, a relatively innocuous style of just like, dressing like a kid, wearing regular stuff, to tall white tees, do-rags, baggy jeans, pants sagging, sneakers with the shoelaces on top, and I tend to when I do something, I go all in. So when I got into that style, I pushed it as far as I could push it. And especially in particular, my dad, we would get into arguments about, oh, you're not leaving the house wearing that, or you're not leaving the house dressed like this. And it was a real battle to express myself at the time, as it pertains to the influences, because children are impressionable. People are impressionable, especially children. It was a real battle to express myself back then. And then I went through this period of, if anyone remembers the hashtag Menswear moment, which was when social media was really picking up, Tumblr, early Instagram, things of that nature. It was this renaissance of dapper style, polos, button downs, blazers, loafers, all of that kind of more dressed up, preppy, tailored fashion stuff. A lot of suiting, influenced by J. Crew at the time, which was really killing it with Mickey Drexler and that whole era of J. Crew, and then other influencers as well, and influences as well. And so I got to this point where I was dressing real like GQ, as people would say, like the GQ magazine, GQ style. And my dad likes to take the credit for that because he was on my back as a kid. He's like, oh, well, pants are on the waist now, you're wearing a belt, you got the button ups, you're wearing suits, it's because of difficulties. But anyway, I was just saying that now, after having gone through my childhood phase, the hashtag menswear phase, and then where I am now, it's like I've gone back to where I started as a kid, but now I have all of the references and learnings of the journey that preceded where I am now. So, I don't sag my pants and all that stuff now, right? But it's a more eccentric, refined version of where I started. And now I get things like, why do you wear so much jewelry? Why do you wear black all the time? Like, my mom will be like, oh, you should try wearing other colors, or else people are going to think you wear the same thing every day. And I'm like, that's kind of the idea, because I have a uniform now. I've discovered that I'm somebody who prefers a uniform, so that's not literally like Dexter's Laboratory, same lab coat every day of the week. But especially the color black, most of my wardrobe, 99% of it is black. And of course I have different pieces, but I love having that uniform of reliable pieces that are all interchangeable, that work together. And then the beauty of the color black, it allows you to really accentuate other elements of your look, because the black itself is more subdued and could be even seen as boring. But because you're taking attention away from the color, if you will, you could really maximize things like proportion, shape, texture, and accessories. So it allows you to play a lot more. Whereas if I was wearing all red or all yellow, it's already so loud on its own. And now if you start adding things on top of it, it becomes jarring. So I like the flexibility of black. I could speak about the color for an hour. I'm not going to do that today, but yeah.
I love the color.
It's deep.
Mm-hmm. Is black your favorite color?
Oh, listen, black is an identity at this point. It transcends color. Because I'm really into, to go on a tangent a bit, I'm really into like personality tests and, you know, personality traits. I'm into zodiac and all that stuff. And all of these colors, if you do research, have characteristics attributed to them. Mm-hmm. And when I started going through that deep dive, because once again, to tie it together, when I get into something, I go deep into it. So when I started doing my deep dive on the color black, the references, what it means in the subculture, culturally, and then the characteristics that are attributed to the color, it also matches who I am and how I see myself as a person. So not only do I like the shade of black, if we want to be technical, not only did I like the shade, but I also like what the color represents. Mm-hmm. It speaks well with how I represent myself. So it's deep.
Yeah. With the black it slowly became my favorite color too. And I don't think I'd gone that deep into why I wear black that much. I remember one of the pictures that I posted, I think this was last month, one of my aunties commented and she said, "At least you're not wearing black today." So I was like, I didn't even know that people noticed.
Yeah.
It was black. So you went to FIT.
Yep.
What was that experience like?
It was some of the best 2 years of my life. I really thoroughly enjoyed my time at FIT. I am a proud FIT alum, and I've made friends there that I'm still friends with to this day. And I've acquired skills there that still pay dividends to this day. And I'm very grateful and appreciative of the time I got to spend there. I was in the Menswear program at the time. I can't speak to the curriculum now, but at the time I was there, very competitive program. It was limited to 25 seats per year, and they matriculated students every fall. And by the grace of God, I was able to get in on my first try, and met an amazing group of peers, fellow students, an illustrious faculty that really knows their stuff, storied in the industry, very good at what they do. We got a master class in fashion tailoring, fashion history, textiles, all of the skill sets you need to be successful in the industry. So very appreciative of my time there.
So you guys, FIT means Fashion Institute of Technology. It's a school in New York. And did you ever go into women's wear at all at any point?
Nah. When I started, I actually started, it's a long journey, but I started with the certificate program, and that was women's wear, but it was just a few months. But I knew I wanted to do menswear, and I just used that as a stepping stone to get introduced to that menswear world.
So what would you say is, because I was talking to somebody yesterday, and they own like a eyewear brand, and they wanted to transition into making menswear. And he was saying the reason why he wanted to switch was because he felt like a lot of black men don't are not as confident because they don't dress well. And he noticed that from his like little circle of friends and stuff like that. And he was always like, he spent about 20 minutes talking about the significance of like wearing a suit as well, and how that would even make you feel. So what would you say gravitated you towards making like menswear? What do you want to achieve from making menswear? How do you want that to impact men in general?
Well, if I'm being honest, I started making men's clothing really just for me. Like I wasn't thinking about other people at all. Like, I'm just gonna be honest, you know. When I started working in the industry as a fashion designer, and FIT does a pretty good job of preparing you for this, but what I imagine in most fashion schools, because FIT is a very technical school, but what I imagine, you know, if you watch Project Runway, which, you know, Heidi Klum and others, Michael Kors, it was a show where people would come and compete with their designs and stuff. And then if you pay attention to fashion media, you have this idea of being a fashion designer. You're gonna, you know, be drinking champagne and going to parties and, you know, sketching and making clothes and going to the factory and working with models and all of this. And what really happens is you get a job, depending on where you work, opportunities in America are, you know, it's like American brands, you know, so it's like, it's not like the stuff we see in Paris. So 9 times out of 10, you get a job, you're in an office, you're sitting in front of a computer, and it's just not, I loved working in fashion, but it's not glamorous like, you know, you might come to believe. So, and then the product you're making too, unless you work at one of the more fashion forward houses, most American apparel, no pun intended, most American apparel is like t-shirts, polos, things of that nature, right? Just very basic stuff. So I started making men's clothing to kind of fill a void a little bit because I wasn't making the stuff I was really passionate about making on my day job. So I was like, all right. And also, you're not sewing or making patterns as a designer working in the States. You're just not. So it was multi-tiered. I wanted to push myself creatively to make things that I thought was really interesting. And then I also wanted to maintain the abilities and skill sets I developed in school, making a pattern and doing those things. It really had nothing to do with like helping men dress better or anything like that.
What is your favorite fashion brand?
Rick Owens.
Why?
It's not even close. Rick, man, where do I start? So, surface level, he's an American designer from the West Coast, from California. So he's an American designer, grew up in the United States, if I'm not mistaken, for the majority of his life. He is a true practitioner. He's not a designer who more or less finessed his way into the industry. He actually started as a practitioner, spent years working as a pattern maker, if I'm not mistaken, ripped patterns from other like designers and doing this like for this company. And he talks about it in interviews and stuff, but he spent a lot of time honing his craft as a pattern maker, kind of doing rub-offs for these other brands, and then started doing his own thing and had his own journey into the industry. Now he's based out of Paris. He is so honest and authentic with the way he portrays himself in public, in the media, as a public person. And his work is very reflective of this portrayal, right? He puts a lot of himself into his work. He's created an entire world for people to live in. It's a Rick Owens universe. You can't find the things he does at any other house. If you want Rick Owens, you have to get it from him. His favorite color is also black, which happens to work out. So there's plenty of clothes for me to choose from. And when I mention him building his own world, he has several silhouettes that have been introduced at different times in different collections. And instead of what a lot of houses do, which are more, I'll say, trend driven, more inspiration driven. So for example, when I say that, you have brands who say, well, this collection was inspired by pirates at sea. This collection was inspired by New York club culture. This collection was inspired by off-roading in the mountains. And each collection looks markedly different from the last one. Rick Owens is like, nah, this is my universe that I'm creating. Of course, he's influenced and inspired by things, but it all very deliberately ties back into the overall ethos, and you don't see these 90-degree shifts, these 180-degree shifts collection to collection. They're more nuanced changes, and he builds upon his aesthetic over time, pushing the boundaries slowly and slowly and slowly as he goes. And he is also somebody, from what I've seen, who lives in the extremes. He pushes things. So one thing that really draws me to his work, I've always loved oversized. Ever since I was introduced to it as a kid, wearing the super tall t-shirts, the baggy jeans, all this stuff, the layers, like the white tee with the jersey on top, with the bomber jacket, the do-rag, the fitted, layering, all those things, tucking your jeans into your socks, all of this stuff, right? And then, so like you have that oversized proportion, silhouette, and then he plays a lot with proportion, right? Elongated, cropped, all these different things. He pushes those metrics to the extreme in his work. And I really love that about his work. Everything from sneakers, he'll take a classic silhouette like the Converse Chuck Taylor, he'll rickify it, right? He'll elongate the tongue, he'll make the sole really chunky and oversized, he'll exaggerate details on the leather, he'll have the lace. He does this thing called mega laces where the laces are all over the place and create this shape and this and this. He really pushes his aesthetic, and he's fearless. His work is so fearless and authentic, and he's always reinventing himself while still staying true to his ethos. I once again, another person I could spend an hour talking about, but he's by far my favorite designer. And I feel like, and he's like at the sweet spot where he's popular. Like if you're into fashion, most likely his work. But then if you're not into fashion, you probably don't know his work at all, and you probably don't care. So he's managed to avoid that white hot hype train, more or less, to where the clothing is everywhere and then it kind of gets played out, has a moment. It's like a consistent kind of foundational corner of the fashion universe, if you will. And I imagine most people who wear Rick Owens, aside from maybe the sneakers, most people who actually wear the clothes and invest in the clothes genuinely like the stuff. And it's more of a long-term investment as opposed to, I'm just trying to get this off at a party, Love his work.
That brings me to my next question. With Obi's New York, were you trying to like fit into any, I'll call it a box. Were you trying to fit into like any box? Like, were you trying to make just streetwear, or were you trying to make more casual wear or more business driven? Like, was there any box, or were you just creating things that you felt that you wanted to create?
Do you want the honest answer, or do you want like the PR answer?
We want the honest answer.
Which path do you want to go down? So to take a step back real quick. So with the Rick Owens thing, I would be remiss to not say I didn't discover Rick Owens and then make myself that. Mm-hmm. As like with the stories I told you about my upbringing here and there, as I continue to progress down this personal journey, because style is just another extension of self. Mm-hmm. Self. The same way people work on their mental health, you work on your self-awareness, and you kind of try to upgrade yourself as a person. The same way you work on your body in the gym, or on the track, working out. optimizing your body, or some people really optimize their diets, what they eat. Style is another way of optimizing and expressing the self. And I say that to say, I've been creating myself all through my life, trying things. I tried all the trends, skinny jeans, baggy jeans, preppy, streetwear. I did everything. And through a process of elimination, I've landed here. The same way people noticed you were wearing black, the same thing happened to me. And it wasn't on purpose per se. I started wearing black because it was convenient. If you're running late somewhere, you got to run. This black t-shirt matches with these black jeans. Like, you don't have to think about it. And then if you don't have time to iron it perfectly, just like this tank I'm wearing right now, you can't really see the details anyway. Like, it's, it started out of convenience, and then it became more than that. So I developed my own taste, found Rick Owens, and he happened to be a designer that was speaking to somebody like me. And I joined that world because he was creating a world for people like me. I didn't find his work and then say, I want to be just like him per se, but he was making clothes for me. That's kind of how I found it. It was exactly what I was looking for out in the world. With Obi's New York, this was earlier in my personal fashion development. I did not yet have the level of self-awareness that I currently have today. So Obi's New York today and in the future will look much different than it did in the past. In the past, what I wanted to do was, and literally my concept was, I want to take what's happening in the fashion zeitgeist and make it approachable. I wanted to be a streetwear Gap, and not exactly what Kanye is doing, because what Kanye and Balenciaga are doing is very directional. I wanted to create clothes that could appeal to everybody. So I would push things, but not too much, right? And I imagine a part of that decision making came from me not exactly knowing which direction I fully wanted to go into. So I created clothing that was appealing to everybody because, at the time I didn't have my own cemented identity that I could fall back on. So I had to rely on what I was seeing and then simplify it, make it more accessible. So that's what Obi's New York was. And in hindsight, at the time I got feedback, and I'm reflecting on it now in hindsight, when I would reach out to my industry connects, when I would show it to my peers in the industry, all of that good stuff, a consistent feedback I got regarding the brand at the time was the stuff was amazing. Everyone was always impressed by the quality, the taste, all of that stuff, the presentation. Don't get it twisted. I put my foot in that. You know what I'm saying? I put my foot in that, for one person. Everyone thought I had a team. No, I'm like one guy. I was making the stuff, myself, in the crib, I would work with factories in the city for production, but as it pertains to the pattern making and sketching, I was doing all that stuff myself. And then I would take it and have it made in New York for because I'm not the best sewer, so have professionals do it. So anyway, I say all that to say, a consistent criticism I got, however, was how can you differentiate yourself from what already exists in the market? Because I had that luxury price point, why would somebody pay X amount of dollars for you, who's relatively unknown, when they could take that same money and buy a brand that they know is going to hit, And to bring it home, that was what I understand now about myself, that lack of a concrete identity and direction that was more personal to me. The lack of that is what they were speaking on. They were saying that without saying it, and I'm in hindsight, I'm just now realizing when I do start to brand up again, how I could push it and really take it to the next level and really distinguish it from what currently exists today.
The reason I asked you that is, if just by knowing you, if I went somewhere and I wanted to pick out clothes for you, I'd be able to tell, this is what he's gonna like, this is not what he's gonna like, right? Because I know, like, just by talking to you, I could tell like the kind of mind that you have, and just by tying that to the way that you would dress, I would be like, okay, this is more of his taste. But from what I saw with Obi's New York, I was trying to figure out exactly, like, is this like more street, or is this more, because it had street with some of them, and some of them looked like something that you would blend street and something else in as well. So that was why I was like trying to ask to see if, okay, what exactly was he trying to achieve at that particular time? Okay, so we're gonna go to.
I was trying to do everything. I was trying to be everything for everybody, and as a cliche goes, you try to be everything for everyone, and you end up being nothing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, yeah.
So how about UX design? So were you always in UX design, or is this something that you just picked up, learned, and you wanted to have that as like a other job? How did you get into that field?
So, are you familiar with the film The Devil Wears Prada?
Yes.
Okay. So that is a sensationalized version of what it was like working in fashion for me. I can't speak to whether it was actually like that at one point, because that was a lot of stuff and it was pretty crazy. But the fashion industry, from my experience as a designer, it has a toxic work culture where I always minded my business. I tried my best to just do my work and focus on that. And I loved working in fashion. It was very cool and all of that stuff. I loved what I was doing. I loved learning more. Even if I wasn't necessarily passionate about the product, I was passionate about the process. I wanted to learn as much as I could and really take myself to the next level skill-wise. But a lot of the spaces I was in they were just not the most inviting spaces as it pertains to not so much my managers, because I try my best to keep a healthy relationship with them. But I just remember at this one job I was working at, I would go on my lunch break in the communal area and you would just hear people just talking badly about other people. Like, everybody was just talking about everybody. I remember, some of my colleagues would go into a meeting and they would come back from the meeting and talk about how in the meeting they would talk fly to people like everything was all good, and then talk about them behind their back and talk smack and all of this. It was so toxic and normalized. Like, from what I saw, like, that's just, everyone was kind of in on it. And also, the biggest irony to me of being a designer in the fashion industry is on the, I guess, corporate hierarchy when it comes to the disciplines. Designers are like at the bottom, or at least you're treated that way, right? It's, from my experience, merchandisers, the salespeople are closer to the top. And as a designer, it's like this paradox. You're taught to be creative in school, right? Or at least you're taught to know how to push things forward, how to be a talented designer, how to do research, pull references, and really innovate and push things. And then you get the job, and you have a manager who's usually a designer, but you're not really working with them or for them. You're working for merchandisers who are going to do the assortments. They're going to tell you what colors they need based off of what worked last year. And what would happen, and a lot of my peers in the industry at the time could attest to this, what would happen is you'll design this collection, you'll have all these references, you do mood boards, you do your presentation, everyone's like, oh, this is great, this is dope. And then you work on it, you send it to the merchandisers, they come back and they're like, yeah, man, this is great. We love this, but we got to go back to what we did last year. Like you're good. Or it's like you have this idea, like, yeah, this is dope, but let's make this navy. All that stuff you did was cool. Let's just put a logo here, and add this one detail here and just do that. All the cool stuff you did, let's save it for another time. It's great, we're just not going to use it now. Things like that would happen all the time. So it's like this performative creativity, but it's really the bottom line is sales. And one thing that was nasty to me about the industry was certain brands compete for price. They don't necessarily compete who has the best design, who's the most innovative. They compete for price. So if you're working for a company and a competitor has maybe a new product with a better price point, your goal becomes, how can we, and if you're the more expensive one, how could we bring our costs down to that new lower price that our competitor's doing and finesse the product? So it's like the goal is to give a cheaper price, but you're going to then produce a worse product. So what would happen is you'd have something that was really great, and it's like, oh, the fabric is really great. All right, let's step on the fabric and get a fabric that's not so great. Oh, we have these seam lines that do this and provide this and this for the fit. Let's get rid of those and go to something a little more basic. Oh, we have these accents. Maybe we have silver accents because they're really dope. All right, let's go down to brass. We were using these really great zippers over here. Let's go back to the basic zipper. So, and then through marketing, you will sell those features as new innovative features, but they're really a takedown, and it's a lesser version of what the customer was accustomed to getting. But through marketing, you try to trick them like new lower price, and we've added this, and instead of, if you're using 100% cotton fabric and it was like a great cotton, and say you use a poly blend, instead of like, which, you know, depending on the vertical, the product vertical, most consumers, if I'm not mistaken, prefer 100% cotton as opposed to polyester blends. It feels better on the skin in most cases. All these different properties, right? People like 100% cotton stuff. So instead of saying like, oh, no one's gonna say, oh, we stepped on it and made it a blend so it could be cheaper, but they'll say something like, oh, quick dry, performance, functionality. Like they'll try to big up the change. You know what I'm saying? And it's quick drying because polyester essentially is plastic and it doesn't retain moisture. So it's quick drying because now half of the garment doesn't retain moisture at all. So yeah, of course it's going to dry faster because cotton is organic and it holds moisture. So yeah, like it just, the industry was just, and I was working in it, and you're overworked. Fashion designers, and at least in America, from my experience, are notoriously underpaid. Mm-hmm. Notoriously underpaid. And you're overworked, and it just got to a point where it didn't make sense anymore. It just didn't make sense to, eventually you can only trick somebody or fool somebody or pull the wool over someone's eyes for so long before they realize, like, wait, what's going on here? I remember hearing about you'll break your back making a collection, working late nights. I had nights where I'd be in the office by myself. You're in the office with your colleagues, they go home, the cleaning staff comes, they go home, and you still in there, still working on stuff because, the world is going to end if you don't make this deadline. And then you come to work, so you leave the office at maybe 11:30 at night, right? Get to the crib at maybe 1:30 a.m. Then you still have to decompress from the day, get yourself together. You still have to eat, all these things. And then maybe you're 10 minutes late the next day. I've had experiences where I've been taken to the side, like, yo, why are you late? I left the office 6 hours ago. You know what I mean? Or something crazy like that.
Yeah.
And nobody is giving me a pat on the back for staying late to get the job done. But because I was 10 minutes late for this internal meeting, I'm being pulled to the side and my performance is like, how much of that are you going to subject yourself to before you realize something has to change? You know, so this is probably a much longer story than you bargained for, but I was going through all of that, and then I just realized now my mind was open to doing something different, because I thought I was going to be a fashion designer. I thought that was going to be my career. I was just going to move up, and that's what I was going to do. But now there was like this dissonance now, and my mind started opening up to, hey, maybe something has to change. And I started realizing a lot of the people around me were working in tech. A lot of people around me were working in tech and talking about how if you hear things like, oh, Google has free lunches, they have cafeteria, and this is like the top of the mountain, so you can't literally compare every company to this, but they have cafeterias, free food. I think they have an arcade in their building. They have unlimited PTO. You hear about all of these things and the way the employees are treated on this side. And then when you do your Google searches, no pun intended, you see all of the different kinds of jobs that are available in these industries. And then I'd be remiss if I didn't also mention, you see the bag. That tech designer bag is not the fashion designer bag. It's not even close. It's not even remotely close. And, you know, what has been seen cannot be unseen. Once the wool was pulled from my eyes, no pun intended, and I could see the light, I was just like, nah, I can't continue to do this. It doesn't make sense.
He discovered Zion and went over there.
Basically, like, not even Zion. I just discovered the way it's supposed to be. You're supposed to be, if you spend most of your time at work, working for somebody else. I remember when I think about working in fashion, what I was paid yearly and salary, I would produce like hundreds of thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars, depending on the collection and the scope. 5 to 6 figures worth of product, which could result in 7 to 8 figures worth of profits. And I'm being paid, the amount they're paying me is like an accounting error on a spreadsheet compared to what I'm bringing in. You know what I'm saying? And it just didn't, you spend all this time working for someone else, building someone else's dream, and you're not being treated well.
Yeah.
It just, you start to realize this is not normal. And if that's all you know, you think it's normal and you don't think about it. But once people start pulling your coat on what the outside world is actually like, you're just like, you can't go back to the way things were. So
did you learn the skill after you figured that? Did you go in and learn the skill, or was it something that you already had previously?
So I had a little bit of a head start, because in fashion, the tools we were using, Illustrator, Photoshop, things of that nature, the tools we were using are similar to the tools we use today as UX designers, primarily Figma right now. So I had a head start. When I quit my job in fashion, enrolled in school, a boot camp, whatever you want to call it, certificate program, whatever you want to call it, I didn't have to spend time learning the software, which was a huge advantage for me because I could get straight into the ideology. I was not handicapped by what I could do technically because I had already been using software that more or less transitions one-to-one with what I was doing in fashion. And then another advantage I had, and currently still do have, is design is design. That design thinking, the research, the data analytics, the customer feedback, the client reviews, the presentations, organizing data, organizing work, all of those design systems, that system thinking also exists in fashion design. So I was able to apply at the time 5+ years of fashion industry knowledge was directly transferable to the UX stuff. So I already knew how to approach, from a problem-solving lens, these UX challenges. So I had the advantage of being familiar with the software, and I had the advantage of being familiar with the ideology. I just then had to make adjustments to the canvas, but I already had the paint and the brushes I needed to paint that canvas.
So what advice, this is usually the last question I ask, because I think it's necessary for people, especially people who are looking to get into these different spaces and don't know how to, or they're probably getting discouraged because of parents or whoever is around them that's making them feel some type of way or feel small because of probably how they dress or what they want to do, and not recognizing that and respecting that. What advice would you have for people who want to go into fashion first and then UX, and just even pretty much building their brand as a creative and defining themselves?
That was like 4 questions. Yeah, so I'll start with the ones I remember, and then you can recite the ones that I missed. Mm-hmm. Today, when you say fashion, are you talking about working for a company or working for yourself?
Working for yourself. I think it's better to advise people on how to become brands of their own. And you could, if you want, you can use that to work for somebody else, but eventually your own dreams matter more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course. So it's tricky. All right, so there's 2 answers I can give. There's the there's a follow your passion answer, and then this is what is most likely going to happen to most people answer. Do you want both?
It was both.
Okay, I'll start with the follow. So the follow your dreams answer is, once again, style is another way that we express ourselves. It's another extension of our being, of our likeness. And if you're passionate and driven to pursue fashion and to start your own collection and start your own line, 100% you should do that, because it's going to be challenging in the beginning, like most things. But if you can stick it out, and if you're lucky, because there's luck involved with everything, it'll pay dividends, regardless, not even talking about figures or like monetary compensation, but just knowing that you wanted to put something in the world and you did that and you're doing it on your terms is something to be very proud of. Now, I would be remiss. We could call this podcast I Would Be Remiss. I would be remiss if I did not also very honestly say, in my opinion today, the way that even I started my brand back in 2018, and the way a lot of people start brands, where it's very like, they follow in the footsteps of the designers of old. We're going to put together a collection, and we're going to do wholesale, and we're going to sell our clothes here, and we're going to sell our clothes there, and we're going to have fashion shows. We're going to do fashion week. We're going to do the fashion calendar and do 2 to 6 collections a year. And yeah, so I'd be remiss if I didn't also elaborate on how I feel like if you're looking to the past ways of working to illustrate how you should work today, I don't think that's a really good strategy, because the designers we look to, the storied designers from, back in the day, right? Whether it's Ralph Lauren or Gucci or whatever, right? All of these storied brands, they lived and continue to live, for those who are still with us, in a different world. The world was different when they started. Everything was different. We have new technologies now. The zeitgeist is different. People consume content and products differently. The consumer is way more educated now. They have way more options and access to things. I feel like if you approach it in that way, you could, and anything is possible. You can do it that way and still be successful. But I would say, like, for the vast majority of people, because there's always exceptions, for the vast majority of people, if you're going to approach it that way, I don't think, I mean, let me know how that goes. You know, if I'm wrong, then that's great, but I wouldn't recommend it. And then I'm not the guy who's going to tell somebody to drop everything and follow their dreams. It's a multi-layered conversation, because different things like, what is your financial situation? How old are you? Where do you live, for example? If you don't live in California, right? LA, San Diego, if you don't live in New York, New Jersey, if you don't live in Vegas, like if you don't live Chicago, even, like if you don't live in these major metropolitan areas, it's going to be much harder for you to gain traction, because especially in the US, most of the people who really consume fashion, depending on what you're doing, if you're doing something that is very like accessible, maybe you're making t-shirts and you're selling them for $20 or something like that, and you're selling them online, great. But if you're like a designer and you're making garments, cut and sew, tailoring, and you have price points into the hundreds, if you're not in these metropolitan areas, particularly New York and LA, your audience pool is going to be significantly smaller, because there's just going to be less people who want to dress like that, or like who care, or even have the references or the influences needed to make them even understand what you're doing. And somebody, especially people who are outside of that fashion world, can wrap their minds around paying $1,000 for something from Hermes, because Hermes is relatively a household name and everyone knows it's expensive. You can get Hermes at the mall, I think. You know, like the luxury brands that have stores in the mall, like Louis, Gucci, you can get it at the mall, people know it. But if you're a smaller brand and your thing is $1,000, they're gonna look at you like you're nuts. Like, why would you do this? Like, you know what I'm saying? And the more kind of mean people will say things like, you are not insert person. Like, why is your stuff? Oh, this person thinks he's insert person. Why is your stuff so expensive? You know? So, and then fashion in particular, it takes a lot of time, a significant amount of time for most people before they can turn profit. So if you don't have a day job, you are going to be living in Penn Station, you know, or with a friend, with your parents, couch surfing. You are going to spend significantly more money than you make for a long time. I listened to How I Built This, a podcast by Guy Raz, and he was interviewing Telfar Clemens and his business partner. And if I'm not mistaken, the Telfar story to prosperity is a 15-year story. The Telfar bag didn't get off until 2020, the way the story was told. And he had been in the industry working for 10 to 15 years before that. And the Telfar bag is really what got him out of here. Like him, his team, that's when the money really started flowing in, you know? And then I believe there was some partnership before that. He had a partnership with White Castle where he was doing manufacturing for them. But those happened more recently. But there was this long career of figuring it out. And for most brands, the money's just not going to come in for a while, you know? Even brands that we know about, that we think are killing it, there were several brands that went out of business as soon as the pandemic started. And any company who shuts down as soon as that income stream is cut off means that they were either in the red or they were check to check keeping the lights on, right? Because they didn't have that cushion to sustain themselves, which must mean they weren't really turning a profit. If you shut down so quickly like that, and a lot of fashion brands did. So brands that, and just because a brand has press doesn't mean they're killing it, because press does not always mean sales. So for those who really want to get in and do it, really do your research, study, and make sure you know what you're actually getting yourself into. And even saying that, there are people who, if they do their research, they'll get discouraged and they won't do it. So some people should kind of just do the naive thing and jump in it and maybe figure it out as they go. But I don't know. Did I answer your question? At least that part of the, yeah.
How about the UX part?
Remind me the nuances of the UX part.
So what advice would you give people that want to get into UX design or transition from a different industry into the UX design industry?
I have this conversation all the time. I even wrote an article about this. But similar advice that I would give people in fashion, right? Fashion is something that is so accessible today. Anybody or most people can start an LLC. Most people have access to a screen printer. Most people can buy blank t-shirts and press up some tees and design a logo and start a brand. That doesn't mean you should do it though. You know, like you really need high levels of self-awareness. Really know yourself and what your aptitudes are, what your skill set is, before you dive yourself into something. UX design is another field that a lot of people think they can do. They see it, you know, it's UX design. There's all these boot camps. So, you know, the boot camps aren't cheap, but that's another thing. You don't need to go to school to be a fashion designer. You don't need to go to school to be a UX designer. I highly recommend school. I am a big proponent of formal education. I believe in the structure of it. I believe in the curation of it. And then I believe in the connections and opportunities that school brings. So I'm biased. But when you have these fields that you don't need formal training to get into, and you can kind of like, in the case of UX, you have a computer, Figma's free, you can kind of just download it and you can just start doing stuff. A lot of people are going to want to get into it, and they're not really going to know how challenging the job actually is and how you can't do the job and wing it, especially if you want to work with clients and you want to work at a company. People are going to really going to vet you to make sure you know what you're talking about. You cannot finesse. People are going to know. It's night and day. Somebody who is passionate about the field, someone who's done their homework, someone who's put in the practice, put in the time, it's night and day compared to someone who's trying to finesse. They see the salaries, it's something that anyone can do, and it's, oh yeah, why not? Give it a shot. Make sure you do your homework. Do your homework. Ask people before you sink money into a boot camp. At least watch some YouTube videos. Find free resources out there so you can practice and try it out. Reach out to your peers and talk to them about what they do on a day-to-day. If you don't know anyone in the industry, reach out to people on LinkedIn, email people. That's the advice I would give. Like, a lot of people are just there are people who kind of just look for the hot thing and just say, I'll do that. And ultimately, I would say the main theme of everything I'm talking about here, and I guess the theme of my life, has just been, life is a journey of self-awareness, right? And the older you get, and this is the gift of aging, the older you get, the more information you have, and the more time and experiences you have to really create yourself. You're constantly creating and recreating yourself. And as you get this self-knowledge, your personality, your tendencies, the things you like to do, what do you spend a lot of time procrastinating on, all of this education, you can then begin to align yourself with certain disciplines, certain professions that you're naturally going to have a propensity to excel in, because throughout your life, you've inherently been groomed and nurtured to do this. It's not going to be an uphill battle to allocate yourself in this way, because you have a natural inclination to it because of your experiences and your interests. So really spend time making sure you understand who you are, what you like to do, what works for you, and then find disciplines that align with that, as opposed to finding something that's hot, for people who do this, finding something that's hot, or finding something that can give you clout or whatever, or just looking for the bag, and then spending time and resources in a field that you were never really suited for.
Thank you,
Hope
sir.
that doesn't come off harsh, yo. Like, I'm just,
nah. People have to hear it like that too, just so it sinks in. We don't have to be sugarcoating stuff all the time. And that's kind of the essence of this whole thing, because what we're talking about is something that people are afraid to talk about, for a lot of reasons that I probably don't understand, because I've never been afraid to say anything I want to say anyway. But thank you so much. So many gems in this conversation, and I know a lot of people enjoy it because I enjoyed it. Thank you, and we're gonna speak again, me and you, separate, out of here.
Let's do it.